Promised then just before the break, and of course you would have seen the sit-down conversation that my colleague reporter Nhlanhla Kgatlana had just now with the suspended Secretary-General Ace Magashule, who's a bit to overturn his suspension, was dismissed today with cause. We talk about that, but we also of course focus on the former President Jacob Zuma, who also lost his bid in the Pietermaritzburg High Court for stay of warrant of execution for his arrest. Let's get more on both of these. We're now joined via Zoom by political analyst Professor Dirk Kotze to unpack the impact of dismissal of former President Jacob Zuma's application for stay of arrest and suspended ANC Secretary-General Ace Magashule's suspension case dismissed with costs. A very good afternoon to you, Prof. Kotze. It's always a pleasure to see you. Thanks indeed for being with us this afternoon on SABC News.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
All right, Prof. So let's talk about the implications then politically for the suspended Secretary-General Ace Magashule. We have, learned over the years not to necessarily write anyone off after some kind of fall. Famously, we saw that with the former president himself after he was indeed suspended from the ANC and then expelled and then came back. I mean, when it comes to ANC politics, nothing really can surprise us. What are your expectations then, and what are the implications politically now in terms of what's now going on with Ace Magashule? I saw some conversations that at this point it looks as though he's going for getting expelled.
Yes, I think what he indicated now, the fact that he wants to appeal, is going to put this for a while sort of in reserve.
Yeah.
Or that we can't come to a point of saying explicitly this will be the end result of it. But for the moment, until his appeal has been either accepted or not, I think the judgment of today is the significance of that is, first of all, that it says that the constitutionality of the ANC's constitution is affirmed with this, especially the section of Rule 2570, which deals with stepping aside. So it means that the ANC can use that rule in future against or for the purpose of other persons also who have been charged in court of serious crimes. The same applies to the procedure that was followed for Ace Magashule's own suspension. The fact that it was, for example, that he argued that he didn't have the opportunity to present his case. That was not accepted by the court. So the procedures that the ANC decided upon, as well as its own constitutional provisions, actually now the court gave them the green light to say you can continue to use them as you've done in the past up to now. And I think this is providing, at least until it's overturned by an appeal, gives the ANC quite a good now indication of how they can deal with this matter, which is obviously strengthening the hand of President Ramaphosa and those of the others that are implementing this decision, also at the provincial level. So I think from that point of view, it's clearly a strengthening of the anti-corruption drive within the ANC, especially that of President Ramaphosa. For Ace Magashule, it's obviously a major setback. He will argue it's only a temporary setback, but it is at this stage. And which means that he cannot make a return to the ANC now until the appeal is successful, if it will be. And the situation continues. Now, if you put that on top of the latest developments with respect to President Zuma, then it means it is really detrimental to those who call themselves the Radical Economic Transformation Movement, those groups that are associated with the MK Veterans, Military Veterans Association, all of them together. It sort of compounds. It really becomes two or more matters having a sort of an integrated effect on them, and from that point of view, I think it is a major shift, even more in favor of President Ramaphosa.
Yeah.
And for his opponents, it is definitely a very bad week.
Yeah. Prof, you mentioned those that seem to be RET forces, and from the conversation that my colleague Nhlanhla was having with the suspended Secretary-General, it seemed as though he was painting a picture of unfairness. I heard him talking about inconsistencies when it comes to certain people within the movement, and no doubt it does seem, of course, that he's talking about what we're talking about here, the RET sort of faction. Are you of the view that those in this faction, and I'll call it the opposite faction for lack of better terminology, that are in the opposite faction of President Cyril Ramaphosa, don't actually have a future within the party whilst he's at the helm? And I think that's something that the Secretary-General was touching on, that in the past, you could have differences and you could be divided, but you kind of were still all housed within one family, one body. But it does seem at this point that there is a shift from that.
Yes, that is indeed so, and I think it follows on what I tried to say in my first response, and that is that the main figures, the main leading personalities, and that is President Zuma as well as Ace Magashule, the Secretary-General, are to a large extent now not able or available for these opposition groups or alternative groups within the ANC to have a visible leadership. So the question is now, who's going, in their absence for the moment at least, who's going to be able to maintain the momentum? Because together with this is, I think, a very strategic move that has been made by President Ramaphosa and others within the NEC, and that is the decision of the last NEC to insist that the MK Military Veterans Association as well as the MK National Council must again be dissolved and that they must merge.
Yeah.
Subsequently, the suspension of Karl Neus actually deepened that crisis, I would say, for them. So on the one hand, the leadership personalities, as well as the other hand, the organizational foundation that they can use for their mobilization, to a large extent have been paralyzed now. So there's very little for them at this stage in order to be able to use, in order to build up a more sustainable movement, and not only sort of in events-based situations like what we are seeing at the moment in KwaZulu-Natal, because it is not sustainable. It's built around the current situation of President Zuma, but what happens in the rest of the country? What happens in Gauteng or Limpopo or Mpumalanga or the Northwest or even the Free State?
Yeah.
And they don't associate with the same issues, and I think that's the difficulty for the opposition group, is how to build that new momentum.
Yeah, and I know my team is asking me to wrap up at this point, so I'm going to push it just a little bit further, though, because we haven't touched on former President Jacob Zuma and his bid to stay warrant of execution for his arrest. So very quickly, Prof, I mean, there's further implications of this, no doubt. It's indeed a legal matter, as we've continually been told, but it does have political ramifications, whether we like it or not. Can we talk to that, please? Let's talk about the political ramifications, if any. I mean, it's already gone as far as it can possibly go in terms of the former president already being in prison at this stage. But is there anything further in terms of what we got today?
Not really much. It actually just said that the court, the provincial, the High Court in Pietermaritzburg didn't have actually the jurisdiction to even hear this case. So it doesn't really pronounce on the content, on the merit of the case so much. It was merely a type of a procedural aspect that became the main part of the judgment. But at the same time, it actually said, that although they didn't pronounce on it, I think the implication is that they couldn't see really sufficient argument or grounds for a stay of the arrest, which means that, again, it supports by implication so far the judgment by the Constitutional Court. Again, for President Zuma, obviously, it makes his appearance, or not his, but his case before the Constitutional Court on Monday even more important, because everything will now depend on whether that is going to be successful or not.
All right, Prof, we appreciate your time as always. Thank you indeed for being with us here on SABC News this afternoon.